Welcome to Season 9, Episode 57 of the Be Conscious podcast. Today, I am pleased to interview Ann Russo, psychotherapist and founder of AMR Therapy. Listen in as Ann shares her journey growing up in a queer, non-monogamous household and how her unique upbringing informs her clinical practice. Here we go.
Welcome to the Be Conscious podcast, the show that brings you enlightened perspectives on the frequency of money, life's many challenges, and those heavy feelings that may be holding you back from living your best life. And now your host, Dr. Susan Nicholas.
In this episode of the Be Conscious podcast with Ann Russo, we're going to talk about the intersection of religion, faith, and sexuality. Now, whether or not you've been in conflict with your religion or familial beliefs surrounding relationships and sexuality, one essential thing is your mental presence and clarity of thought. Something that has helped me on my conscious journey with my mental clarity and alertness is Magic Mind. Magic Mind is a delicious, clean, and organic 2-ounce mental performance shot that keeps you at peak mental performance throughout the day. No more of those midday energy slumps. If you're looking for an alternative to the jitters and the ups and downs of caffeine, or if you simply want to enhance your favorite energy drink, try Magic Mind. You'll wonder what you ever did before Magic Mind, and if you're anything like me, you'll look forward to it each morning. If you're listening here, you get a 48% discount on subscriptions or 20% off single orders with code BeConscious20 at checkout. That's www.magicmind.com/BeConscious20. Now let's get back to our interview with Ann. Ann Russo is a psychotherapist with a master's degree in theology and a deep personal understanding of diverse relationship structures from her upbringing. Ann specializes in integrating cognitive behavioral therapy, sex-positive approaches, and psychodynamic principles. She focuses on supporting marginalized communities, particularly those exploring alternative relationship structures, sexual identities, and the intersection of sexuality and faith. Ann, welcome to the Be Conscious podcast.
Hi, Susan. Thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited to be on today.
Oh, thank you so much for being here. As I told you before we started recording, I'm so excited for this conversation because I think so many people struggle with this idea of their sexual identity, their sexuality and relationships, and their religion or faith. And I'm going to admit that I am one of those people.
Most people are, Susan. So it's a difficult thing, but it's not a unique circumstance, you know.
Absolutely. I wanted to start out, if you would indulge us, with your upbringing and how that influences what you are doing today.
Sure, Susan. So when I was growing up, I was raised in a queer household in the 80s. When I was 5 years old, my father came out as gay. And during that time, it was a very difficult time to come out. So he did share with my mom, and my mom, believe it or not, was very accepting of who he was and his difficult experience of coming out as a gay man. So he met his partner, and from the time that I was 5 to 14, I lived with my mom, my dad's partner, and my younger sister all in one household.
Mm.
Tricky business in the 80s.
Oh, I mean, what stands out to me is maybe the emotional or spiritual maturity or wisdom of your mother. Like, how did she stay in that?
It's very interesting that you said that because About 10 years ago, I interviewed my mom and asked her about her ideas about being gay and being religious. And she is a Catholic woman and raised Catholic. And she said her faith is actually what allowed her to accept what my dad was going through.
Mm.
I found that very interesting because it's not something that I would typically expect an answer to be. And it was not anything I'd ever heard her say before. So she believed, God is love, and this poor man, as she said, is struggling, and I'm going to support him in his journey.
Mm. You know, that reminds me about any situation in life where perhaps it's not what happens or what things look like, but how you perceive it that really defines who you are, who we are, and how the situation would play out. Because you could see the other side of the Catholic belief system, which would outwardly reject it.
Yes. Yes. And that is absolutely what I would imagine would have happened. I really had thought that my mom rejected his experience but wanted to be there for us kids. But I didn't realize that it was also because she did love him, but also respected his journey using faith and love.
Mm,
And the pain that she said he must have felt going through that, which is unbelievable, really, because she was going through her own pain and loss and grief at the idea that her husband had just come out as a gay man.
right. So it sounds like your mom has a very deep sense of empathy.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Wow. I mean, that's a superpower, you
It
know.
it is. It is. My mom is truly one of the kindest people that I know.
Mm.
One of the kindest people that I know.
You know, if I can just imagine that if I were in your mom's place, even if I was empathetic to, I would say, the struggle or the suffering of my person I loved, I feel like that this living situation that you describe, what I would have felt insecure. Like I would have felt, I mean, this was like my journey in like a normo cis hetero relationship. That if my spouse had said, "Hey, I'm really gay," and our my partner's going to live with us, I in my own bones, I probably would have felt too insecure to do it. And so I think there's some level of emotional maturity beyond the empathy that she must have had to be able to live in that situation. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, I do. And when it comes to what was happening in life at that time, I think the most important thing for her really was my sister and myself. And I just don't know if she knew any other way to manage the situation. I think that she wanted us to have my dad. She wanted to absolutely be a part of our lives. And I think that in conversation with my dad, she decided that that would be the best thing to do based on the era and the place that we lived. I don't think that that's a choice many people could make.
Mm. Like I said, I don't know that I could make it.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, I don't think that I could make it either. And that is my experience, right? And I think it was a very difficult choice. And I think in some ways, it stunted her ability to move on and have a healthy romantic life until she got remarried about 12 years ago, and which I'm very happy about. And but I think that she was so involved with this five family unit that it did prevent her from getting to be her own woman, so to speak, for a while.
Mm. May I ask, what were you going through I mean, I know you were 5 and you said you have a younger sister, so you probably maybe weren't fully developed in your thought processes and coping skills at the time.
Mhm.
But you said 5 to 14, so you came into some awareness and maturity during this period. What were your thoughts about the whole thing? How did you feel about it?
Well, at 5 years old, and I can really remember this very well, we lived in the same town as all my extended relatives when my dad came out, and no one in my family had ever really moved out of this town since they immigrated here in the early 20th century.
Okay.
And when he came out, being in this small town, he didn't feel like it was a safe place for him to be.
Mm-hmm.
And we moved away. And we were and that I think was more difficult than anything else.
Okay.
So it wasn't so much, I mean, I didn't really understand. I just knew this is my dad, this is his partner, this is my mom. That to me, it was completely normal and fine, and life was grand. The thing that made it challenging was external factors.
Mm-hmm.
We were not allowed, once we moved, we were not allowed to say that dad was gay.
Mm-hmm.
And we acted as though my parents, biological parents, mom and dad, were married and that his partner was a friend of the family.
Okay.
Yeah, and that was extremely challenging, but I didn't realize, Susan, how challenging it was until I was an adult formulating my own relationships.
Right, right. Because essentially you're living a lie.
Yes. Yes.
Or there's this duality. Like at home, there's one reality and one truth, and then outside, there's a different one.
But you're right. You are living a lie in essence. And it was a
Mm-hmm.
lie that I was told was put in place to protect us. And I
Mm-hmm.
do believe that that lie was put in place to protect us, but it still has its damage, right?
Exactly, exactly. Mm. You just reminded me of something that I have introspected very deeply on about our beliefs.
Mm,
Some sometimes we hold antiquated belief systems because they're familiar to us, and essentially they were handed to us, or almost we inherited them, like in our DNA, like at a very core foundational place in us we have these core beliefs.
yes,
And sometimes we recognize, or we grow, or we come into awareness, or we realize those beliefs are no longer serving us, or in fact that they're not actually true.
yes,
And
yes,
then we recognize the damage that that lie or that belief that we now see as an untruth has affected us. And
absolutely.
then, it can lead to other types of emotional trauma and drama and breakdown. Um, when you realize that your whole life you've been fed one thing,
Yes,
but the truth is something very different.
yes. And what I think is so fascinating about that too is this doesn't always come from a place of malice.
Right.
You know? So it's like we carry certain traumas, all of us do, but it's not because there's someone who had intentionality to harm us or cause us trauma. People are making, in general, the best decisions they can based on the circumstances that they're handed.
Mm. One of the things that I like to bring into awareness about our beliefs is like sometimes they're created, as you said, as a protection mechanism. And sometimes we believe they're harmless. And I like to bring up the belief in Santa Claus.
Mm.
And the reason I say that is because everybody's in on it. So, put this in the context of our Western culture, let's say our American culture. And everybody, the schools, the parents, the community, the government, the entertainment industry, the news media, all industry, everybody's in on it. The stores, all the commerce.
Mm.
And as a child, you're fed this lie, and everybody thinks it's harmless. Like, oh, it's fun. It's like, what's the harm in it? I remember my spouse and I discussing if we would introduce this belief to our son. And I remember we looked at each other and said, oh, it's harmless. It's fun. Why not?
Mm,
Well, what happens with a belief like this, or any belief, is that at some point you start questioning the belief. And when you do, kids will ask, how does Santa Claus deliver all those presents in one night? What if I don't have a chimney? You know, do reindeer really fly? Like, it's true of this belief or any belief. When you begin asking questions of it, you begin unfurling it or peeling back the layers of the lie.
yes.
And what happens with our kids, and I'll just, say what happened with my son. There was a point when he started asking the questions. He's like maybe 9 or so years old, 8 or 9. And he said, Mommy, tell me the truth. Is there really a Santa Claus? And I said, no, buddy. It's your dad and I. And he goes, why would you say that? No.
Yep.
And so it's
Yeah.
kind of like we want to know the truth, but it hurts. It's like, so you fed me this whole thing and everybody's in on it and it's a lie. Well, then we can extrapolate that out to just about everything we've learned.
Yes.
Just about everything, not just
Yes.
about holidays and traditions, but even about ourselves.
Absolutely. Ourselves, our religious beliefs, our political beliefs,
Mm-hmm.
every possible nook and cranny of the human existence.
Is built on a lie. Yeah.
Yeah.
So I wanted to ask you about what happened at 14. So everything's you're in the bubble. You're in a new community, a different community than your ancestral home or your generational home.
Mhm.
At home, mom and dad, you have a nuclear family and a friend of the family.
Mhm.
And the outside world, but on the inside world, excuse me, the vice versa. You've got your dad, his lover or partner,
Mhm.
your mother, and you and your sister. And so you're living this duality of existence. Then what happened when you were 14 that changed it all?
So 14, I was in 8th grade. And I want to share this part too, and this leads up to what you just asked me. At 13, I could not live like that anymore. I was actually becoming like physically and emotionally unwell.
Hmm.
And I didn't really understand fully why, but I remember that in 8th grade, I finally told someone that my dad was gay. It was my teacher.
Okay.
And it felt like I had just, given the nuclear secrets to the world. I mean, it really did. I mean, it was the guilt and shame of providing that information. She didn't do anything. She listened to me and she was very supportive. But it felt like I had just done the most wrong betrayal just thing that I could ever do. So that's how deep this runs
Mm, mm.
at that time. But I knew these were things that were really difficult for me because I could look back and go, well, why did I cry and feel this need to say this? Obviously, these things are very troubling, right?
Mm-hmm.
But so when I was 14, this was right in the height of the HIV AIDS epidemic. So this was about
Mm.
the 90s, right? There, obviously, it really took off in the 80s, but we're still in the middle of
Mm-hmm.
it.
Mm-hmm.
And my dad was losing friends, and he had some close friends that were living in California. And I think he just wanted to be in a space where he could be free to be himself. So I think just seeing members of his community getting sick and dying did something to him where he wanted to
Mm-hmm.
be with gay men. I mean, essentially. So he had
Right.
friends that were living in Long Beach, California. So he decided that we would move to Long Beach, California, where we could be more authentic and be more honest about our family. So at that time, my mom very briefly moved to another state. And then within the year, she came and had her own place. And I lived with my dad, his partner, and my sister for 2 years. And then I ended up moving in just with my mom in general. But in Long Beach, we were allowed to say that dad was gay, and we didn't even have another option because we were living with dad and his partner only. So there wasn't even a way to be secretive anymore.
Right, right. So I imagine at this time in your life when you 13, 14, you kind of tell the teacher you feel like maybe you're betraying your family or betraying yourself. I imagine
Yeah.
around this time you are also in your own self discovering who you are.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And when I was very young, I did feel attraction to women. And that was difficult because there's a lot of messaging about gay parents raise gay kids, and gay parents shouldn't exist because of that. They're turning everyone gay.
Mm-hmm.
And I didn't want to be part of that stereotype.
Right, right.
But of course that's not true. I mean, my sister is married with children and is, a heterosexual person. So, but I mean,
Mm-hmm.
it's not
Mm-hmm.
true anyway for a million other reasons. But that was kind of a challenge of coming into my own sexuality, but also because I'd seen everything that happened with my dad as far as like having to hide and being afraid and don't say the truth, and
Mm-hmm.
the religious people are after us, and it was very difficult. I did not want to be that.
Right, right.
I would have done anything not to be that.
And you said your mom was Catholic. Were you raised Catholic?
Well, I'm Italian, so that's kind of a requirement. But I wouldn't say that I was practicing. I wasn't practicing a faith. We didn't really practice because religion, specifically again in the 80s, the rise of the religious right, it was in essence like they felt like the enemy.
Mm. So what you're talking about right now, about maybe feeling ashamed of yourself, or if that's a word for it, or feeling like something's not right because of the religion and the lie that your family's telling the community and the world, or maybe you feel like you have to lie about yourself, or there's something shameful about who you are. It reminds me of this comedian, Hannah Gadsby,
Mhm.
who it really struck me because she talked about how being raised in a religious, and I believe her family religion was also Catholic, being raised in that religious environment in ways caused her to hate herself, and how damaging that was.
Well, here's some similarity and some differences. I never thought it was wrong to be gay. I never felt that way. It was never put on me that that was wrong. What I was afraid of was the outside world. So there wasn't a time that I didn't want to be who I was because I innately felt like it was wrong or shameful. It was because I was afraid of how other people were going to react,
Mm-hmm.
or what judgment they were going to put on me, or what stereotype they were going to put on me.
Right.
As far as like I was concerned, I didn't understand. I'm like, why would you hate somebody or dislike them or say mean things about them because they love somebody of the same gender? Like that was like beyond, I
Right.
just did not get that. Like why that would even be a thing. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
it's not like
Mm-hmm.
we're out murdering human beings and like trying to harm people, or just trying to live our life and have love. And that seemed
Right.
like so to hate seemed like the antithesis of what a religion that claims love would do. So that was just very confusing to me.
Right. Right. I mean, I agree. So how did you right side that in your body, mind, and soul? Like this religious construct where like you said, how could you hate or condemn someone that loves who they love? And growing up in a family where there was a secret for many years, and we're in a society where there's a lot of fear that's fabricated
Yes.
around this. How do you right side that in your soul? Like, how did
Yes.
you, especially at that like at that transitional age in life when you're coming into adulthood?
Sure.
To me, saying to me that you never felt wrong or that it was wrong is a higher, it's like higher awareness, because people have shame about, or can hold shame about things, or secrecy and shame about their family or things in their family, even if it doesn't apply to them. Like, I'll give you an example. Um, Covertly or unconsciously, I carried a lot of shame in my family because there was prostitution in my
Mhm.
family line, and it was an unspeakableness. No one talked about it because of the shame.
Mm.
And even though I didn't become a prostitute, or I was never even allowed to. No one talked about it. I felt shame about it. I didn't. It took me until I was in my 40s, having my spiritual awakening, to be able to confront that shame and realize, like you said, how it was affecting me, like it was eating at the inside of me, just like the lie that your family had you hold for so many years. I didn't
Yes.
realize it was affecting me. It was like killing me, actually.
Yes.
And so,
Yes.
how did you reconcile that? Uh, how did you feel good about yourself, if for lack of a better way of thinking about it, in that context of the concept of the family, the community, of the world? Like, how do you have that security in yourself?
Well, that is a very great question, and I wish I had a very clear answer for you, because it really was a very intense journey to get to that place where I could reconcile everything.
Mm-hmm.
But I think that one of the key elements of it for me was the recognition that I was doing to Christian groups and Christian people the same thing that I felt they were doing to me as a gay person. I had stereotypes, I rejected them, I had
Mm.
phobias around them. I was just not into it, to say
Yeah.
the least, right? And I felt like that is so different than most folks, that they're not, they, if they're born, into a religion and they have to come to terms with their sexuality, and it was the exact opposite for me. Absolutely the exact opposite. So I decided to learn about people that thought differently than me. So that's been a project of mine for my whole life. That's just how I've always been very interested in people that are different than me. And I started going to church. I started going to actually a fundamentalist Christian church right out of high school.
Mm.
And I did not, and I could not believe a lot of the things they believed, but I really went deep. Like, I went on a missions trip. I spoke in front of a huge evangelical world conference. I was out also. That's an important element of this. And I feel like those connections, I made very deep connections with people, and I started to understand why people thought what they thought, why they acted the way that they acted, and also their lack of contact with anybody different than themselves.
Mm.
So I feel like we were all doing the same thing.
Yeah, that's very courageous, because I think what tends to happen, and I'm sure you've seen it, and is that when you feel like somebody's judging you or shaming you or hating on you, you tend to avoid them. Like, it's kind of like when I started having my spiritual awakening, I felt like I had to let go of religion entirely, that I didn't know how to cohabitate or be with it when I felt like it was so incongruent with my beliefs.
Absolutely. And I went on to get my bachelor's degree in the study of religion in general, with a focus more on Southeast Asian religion. And then I went on and I got my master's in theology from a Catholic university. And I have to tell you, in the whole time I was always focused on queerness. I was always out, I was always myself. I never hid my
Mm-hmm.
sexuality from my peers. And I never really
Mm-hmm.
had an issue either. And I'm not saying that people maybe weren't saying or doing things behind my back. I don't know. But I just presented myself as just a person.
Right.
I feel like if I carried shame around with me about who I am, it gives people the opportunity to only
Validate
see
that.
me as obvious. Yes, exactly, right? But if I'm just me and I'm do my best to be a loving and kind person with many, many flaws, but I think if I can do that, then it's like I'm no longer, you're not just a gay person, like I'm a full human being, and that's just a part of me.
Mm, I love that. There's this thought about the vibration or the frequency within our soul. I believe that when we hold in our energetic matrix the energy of shame, we don't realize that the frequency of our feelings is the language of the universe. And so if I feel shameful inside of myself, the the vibration that's resonating from my heart is that it's a very low resonating frequency on the logarithmic scale of the of human consciousness. It resonates at 20 on a logarithmic scale, where enlightenment is the frequency of like 1,000 plus. And Dr. David Hawkins characterized this in these measurements in his book called The Map of Consciousness. And so shame is one of those lowest frequencies that a human can embody. And when we resonate out that frequency, the language of the universe, it gives us exactly what we're feeling. It returns to us what we are feeling. So we see more and more experiences and scenarios and things to be ashamed of. And the same thing with fear. If we feel afraid, then if you notice, more and more fearful things show up in your reality. Because that's the power, if you will, of our feelings, and the power of us as creators of our reality. And so we have to pay attention to what we feel. And the same thing is true of our thoughts. They also carry a vibrational resonance, our beliefs. We know our beliefs can feel a certain way inside of our body. That is a resonance. That's a frequency within you. Not a good or bad one, just a frequency. And you can think of it as dense and less dense frequencies. And the idea is that we feel better inside when we feel things like joy and acceptance and happiness and forgiveness and compassion. We just feel better, right? And those are higher and higher frequencies. They carry a higher energetic resonance when measured in the body. And so I think when you said that I wasn't ashamed of myself and I came in as my authentic self, well, that authenticity has a resonance. People know when you feel confident,
Yes.
right? And there's nothing. I mean, we
Yes.
all know it.
Yes.
People know if you're full of love, if that's what you're emanating and giving out,
I love it.
versus a lower, insecure, fearful, whatever, shameful, embarrassed kind of energy.
Yes.
So I think unconsciously, perhaps, when you're young, as a younger person, as a student of religion, even though religion that is outwardly condemning you, you are just blaring out this much higher frequency to the universe, despite all of it.
Absolutely. And by no means am I saying that this work is easy. And I learned so much from that experience that it completely shaped my life, and it shaped what I do for work. It shaped my interest. It made me who I am today. So I'm very grateful for my experience in a more conservative fundamentalist church.
Mm. Take us forward to now. Do you still, I don't know, engage, or do you still go to fundamentalist churches, or do you have other sources, I would say, of support and beliefs right now in your life?
I do have a different belief system, but I think the thing that allows me to be a little bit unique, and I'm not saying again whether this is good or bad, right or wrong, I feel like I can really connect with family members of people that are trying to come out in religious background.
Mm,
So I can sit and talk to the mom who feels like my son's going to go to hell. He's going to be involved in drugs and alcohol, and this is the path of demise for him. And sit and talk and discuss in a way that could be understandably very triggering for other gay people.
I see.
Yeah. So I have no problem entering spaces that are triggering for others because I just don't really feel triggered by them in the same way.
Right. And I think it's true, if for all of us, in a sense, that if we look our struggles in the eye, if you will, and if we're playing the game of transforming energy, of feeling, you know, feeling through it, acknowledging it, bringing awareness to it, feeling through it, then we actually are transforming that energy. And if we play this game well, meaning that we actually move through it, then the student becomes the teacher, right? Because all of those things were lessons
Yes.
in your life. Some of us, we succumb to the circumstance, or we succumb to the lesson that we believe that we cannot overcome it or find our way through it. And so we just suffer in this cycle of, of struggle, and I would say mental anguish and overwhelm and all those lower frequencies that we spoke of.
Yes.
But if you can come out of it, then you then have awareness of what, you have greater empathy for people that are coming through the same circumstance that you did, and the feelings that they must have in relation to that.
Yes.
And you can then help them to transform their frequencies and their energies.
And that is absolutely what I try to do. And I think that the the gift is the ability to not be too triggered. I mean, it happens sometimes, but by people that are very different than myself or hold very different beliefs. I think it's important to
Mm-hmm.
engage with others that think differently, feel differently, because I think sometimes we
Mm.
can be surprised at how much we
Mm-hmm.
actually have in common, and how most people are really trying to do the best they can, live their best life, take care of their friends, their family, them. I mean, there's more of us like that than not. And I think unfortunately there's just this broad brush that gets painted, and we get nervous, or we think we're going to get triggered or traumatized in certain spaces, and that may not always be the case, and so it's a tricky little line that we need to be on, I think.
Yeah, I agree. And you brought up something that I think is really important. It's about the triggers. So we all
Yes.
have things that we know that push our buttons, that trigger us. And most of us, if we're not careful, will spend our entire life trying to avoid it. And I mean, I'm guilty of that. Kind of like the religious thing. When I came into my
Mm,
spiritual awakening, it was excruciatingly difficult for me to go to church. And so I would avoid
mhm.
it. I literally, I just couldn't sit in that frequency. And I've gotten better at it. But for some time, I was just so uncomfortable. I couldn't bear it. And I'll just take it like even into family situations. There were there were frequencies that I was born into. I talked about the prostitution energy, or the shame around having prostitution in our family. but also we grew up in poverty. And so there was that energy of it, that energy of lack and scarcity, of
Yes.
deprivation, which was obviously, the reason that there was prostitution in there in the first place. It's because it was a means of survival. And so
Yes.
for me, because I had so much shame around the prostitution stuff and the sexuality stuff, I wouldn't want to come home. I would try to avoid it because it triggered me. It made me feel all those things that were unspoken,
Mm.
and those energies that had been passed on for generations. And again, once I started raising my own vibration, those things felt excruciating, like heavy. And so anytime I would have to come home, kind of weddings and funerals or holidays kind of things, I would never unpack my bag. I literally would feel myself coming out of myself, like I had to get out of there. And so I could never
Mm.
stay put. But then, as we're evolving as beings, and if that's the game we're playing on the planet of raising your vibration or perhaps ascension,
Yes.
you have to be with it. Like I say, the universe creates all these scenarios that that almost stops you in your tracks, or creates these fantastical experiences where you've got to face it, where you must face it, you must transform it. And I'm actually in one of
Yes.
those scenarios right now. And so even though what I like to point out in all this is, no matter how much work you've done, how much educating yourself, how much knowledge you have, how much you've transformed the energies that you were born into, or how much you've overcome, let's say, there's always more. Like, we don't complete this process. We may complete this embodiment, this lifetime, but we're energy beings, first and foremost. And we
Yes.
move on as pure energy. And so the question becomes, if I look at the energy that I came in with, or the dense, I call it the earth milieu that you were born into, and the one that you're going to exit in, is that vibration higher? Are you at a higher vibrational resonance? Are you closer to love than shame, let's say?
Oh, I love.
And so, or
Yes.
fear, or love or hate, like those kind of dichotomies, like where we think it's like two, like these polarizing energies. So which one are you closer to? And I think to get closer to the love frequency, or what we might call enlightenment frequency, or that of compassion, we have to face whatever triggers us into the lower frequencies, or the denser frequencies. And so, I mean, no matter how much we do, to me, it's just like the layers of the onion. I don't know that we ever get to the core of it in one incarnation, or one embodiment, or one lifetime. I think we've been doing this for many
Yeah.
lifetimes. And some things felt too uncomfortable or too hard for us to deal with. Like, we just shoved it down, and we came in with it from cradle to grave, and we left with it. And so I love people that embark upon this journey of introspection, of energy transformation, of elevation of their vibration and their frequency, their perspectives. Because to me, it's confirmation that we are here to do more than just work a job, if you will, and survive our embodiment. We are actually here to raise our frequency.
Yes. 100%. And I love that you said that it's this journey, because it is. The journey is up and down, and it's absolute work to do this. But more joy is to be
Mm-hmm.
had in the work.
Right. Basically, and it's like, okay, either I can do this unconsciously, where I'm constantly in patterns, conditions, I'm being triggered all the time, and I never elevate it. That's just my whole life. You can look back, and you're just as pissed off and angry as you were back in the day. Or you can say, oh, yeah, I'm still triggered.
Yep.
And there's these conditions and patterns that I'm aware of, but I actually do the work of it. I develop spiritual tools. And then despite all of it, like despite the world, despite what things look like on the outside, despite the news, despite the triggers, you're well inside. To me, that is what this is all about. It's like, how can I hold or keep my vibration high when the circumstance is low? How can I feel good about myself when there are, I would say, infractions to my self-worth? When things that would have triggered me in the past, how do I now hold my vibration? Because they're still going to happen. Life still happens. Things still are disappointing, or there's still going to be hate, and there's still going to be frustration, and there's still going to be deprivation and poverty, and there's still going to be prostitution, and there's still going to be whatever, this whole gender sexuality continuum that's unfolding, and people are on different sides of it. That's still going to occur. But the idea is like, who are you in that?
Yes.
And the only way that you can transform yourself is to
Yes.
transform your thoughts, to transform your beliefs, to transform your actions, to elevate your perspectives. That is what then tames, if you will, the
Yes.
circumstance. What used to bother you, or, I would say it, um, it it would bring you down, if you will, or cause you to feel, to live or wallow in those lower vibrations, no longer do. That's when you know that you've transformed the energy. And then you can come back and say, yeah, I totally get it. I used to feel XYZ way. I was judged, or I was this or that betrayed, or, I was confused, or I was overwhelmed, or I was in fear as well. But now I can see it from
Yes.
an elevated perspective and help you come through those energies.
Yes. Yes. Oh, I love what you're saying. 100%. 100% is doing this all through this idea of love. It's like this deeper work to just stay focused on this love. This that everyone you see is a human being with a soul and a heart and blood running through their veins just like you. No
Mm-hmm.
matter how you may disagree or agree or whatever, like, just take a moment and think of the reality of the depth of connection we have with each living thing here on this planet.
Right. Well, I would say this conscious journey, or this aware journey, is work. It's not easy, but it is worthy. It's a worthy journey to be able to come through,
Yes.
and despite all of it, still feel well in yourself, and actually better in yourself every time you transform a trigger or a dense energy that's within you. It's a part of you. Like you said, it's a part of you. And each time that you do the work, it becomes a smaller and smaller part of you.
Yes. 100%. It does become smaller. It still will be there. It's okay. You may still feel triggered at different times, at different things, but you can do it.
Mm-hmm.
You can move through these things even when it feels impossible. You absolutely can do it.
And I think when we take away the good or bad, even high or low, positive or negative, kind of those ideas around it, and just say, well, there's a sensation in my body.
Mhm.
And then how do I feel a higher sensation, or a better sensation, or something that feels better? We realize that none of it's not good or bad. It just is. And it's just a part of you. Sometimes a part of you that you don't have a corporal memory of. It may have been from a prior incarnation or lifetime or generational stuff.
Yes.
That it's not necessarily yours, but you were, I would say, entrusted with this vibration, um, with the idea that you could transform it if you dare.
I love what you said. I say that to my clients a lot. I say, look, this may not have been something you caused or created, but you're the only one who could make it different.
Absolutely.
So, how are we going to do this? Right?
Exactly. Exactly. Well, Anne, this has been a wonderful conversation.
Yes.
Thank you so much for coming on the show.
Oh, Susan, it's been an absolute pleasure. Thank you so much for chatting with me. You really uplifted my day today.
Oh, likewise. If you will share with our audience how they can best reach and connect with you.
Sure, they can check out my website. It's www. I don't think I even need to say that. Ann, Ann Russo, RUSSO.org. And I have a few different offerings on there. I also have a newsletter that you can subscribe to as well, and all my social media contacts. Would love to hear from folks.
Wonderful, wonderful. And thank you so much for being with us today.
Thank you. Thank you, Susan. Have a wonderful weekend.
Interested in giving Magic Mind a try? For a limited time, you can get up to 48% off your first subscription or 20% off one-time purchases with code BeConscious20 at checkout. You can claim it at www.magicmind.com/BeConscious20. The link can be found in the show notes. I want to thank you for taking this inner journey with us today. And whether you are coming or going, looking inside or out, remember to be conscious. If you love this episode and if today's message resonated with you, please subscribe, rate, and review the Be Conscious podcast. This helps listeners just like you find intriguing and transformative content. And if you want, you can share those thoughts and questions with me at info@susannicholas.org.
Thanks for listening to the Be Conscious podcast with author, TEDx international speaker, and conscious coach, Dr. Susan Nicholas. Be sure to connect with her to stay up to date with her latest news and works. Learn more about her conscious speaking platform at susannicholas.org/speaking. Stay tuned for the next thought-provoking episode. And whether you are coming or going, looking inside or out, remember to be conscious.